this morning, and this is Jan, and she's a recent newsletter case, and just recently just popped her into a newsletter, and quite an interesting complete denture case where she'd had some previous surgery in the past here at the front. So the denture just had this extension just at the front, just there, rather like a Formula One car. So I'm going to go through that just in a sec. Um, so I've also just in the I've had a really bad couple of months within dentistry, probably the worst in the past 10 years. 10 years ago, I decided to completely go go and stop doing fixed pros and go to complete dentures. And it's been the best thing that I ever did because my technician, Rowan, is absolutely terrific at doing removable pros. Now, sadly, Rowan has been ill for the past 2.5 months, and Rowan works in the room next door to me. So I work in quite a unique environment. It's a wonderful place to work because I work in the clinic and then he works in the lab right next door to me. So with him being ill, has really thrown a spanner in the works. So I transferred to another technician who works about 1 hour's drive from where I am. So currently all of my lab work goes through to Sam, and Sam's done some training with Rowan and was his apprentice for about 2 years. He worked with Rowan and learnt from him. So this has been it. He's a great technician, is Sam, but it's not. I just don't have that same flexibility. So my levels of anxiety at work have really gone up quite a bit because of this. However, over the next, Rowan hopefully will get better and will be back with me, but it's unknown. I don't really know. So during this time, I'm using it as a really good experience for helping dentists that don't have that arrangement where the lab isn't on site, which is, generally the most common thing that way dentists work is the technicians off site. So it's going to help me to teach better and be more really realistic with my approach. Also, over the past 2 months, I've had two complaints as well, and I take patient complaints so personally, and it really bothers me a lot. And I'm sure that we're all the same. We take things really personally. So this is complaint number one. This is actually a patient who's actually was a previously he was a dentist. He's now not a dentist, but sadly, um, he had a lesion cancer up at the top here and had that treated. He lives quite a long way from me, about 4 hours drive to the practice. So he's quite a long distance patient. We made this lovely partial, which looked fantastic. But sadly, and sometimes I can't legislate for this, this tooth fractured off due, after 2 months of wearing it. And understandably, he loved it. This patient loved it, but he was incensed by the fact that it had broken. Um, and I had to manage his, anger really, and received a really awful telephone call from him. And we've managed to resolve the whole situation, but it was just a really uncomfortable situation. And then I've just been away on holiday over the summer. I had a lovely 2 weeks off, and then got back to work on Monday, and I had a letter on my desk, waiting for me, a complaint, another complaint from a patient here. This is someone that, again, this is a woman. She lives, she actually has to fly to her. She lives outside of the UK. I've been treating her for about 10 years. And made a number of sets of complete dentures. This is the third set, implant over dentures. And we've had a great working relationship. And this is Mark 3. She just wanted some slight changes. And I fitted them about 2 years ago in August 2022. There's a little bit of discomfort there. I've monitored her and seen her for about 5 visits since fitting and thought that was, she just mentioned minor concerns there. But she, the last time that she was in, which is in April, she told me that it was sore and, I adjusted that and made that right for her and said, I can't promise you anything, but hopefully that will feel better. Sometimes making new dentures when they've previously had comfortable ones is quite tricky because this is my third set with her, and but that was to no avail. And she sent me a letter saying that my attitude to her had changed over the time and our professional relationship had broken down. So what I did was I looked at the video of me treating her and noticed that that morning, and it was at the end of the morning, I was quite hungry before lunch. I'd had a really difficult morning, and in particular, I had a patient earlier on that morning who'd really been really upset me the way he'd approached um, me and the treatment, and it really unsettled me. And so I was just not in a great mental state, and I wasn't as compassionate and empathetic with this patient as I should have been. And so she's got absolutely, I totally understand. And I've responded to her and said to her, look, I'm very happy to see you again and we can rebuild our relationship, or I'm happy to refund you for the full amount for this set of dentures if you want to find another dentist. So that's where we're at. But I have talked to my mentor about this and we've been thinking about it over the past week. Dentistry is really tricky, isn't it? It can just turn on in an instant. So what I've decided to change, which is rather than when I see a patient, and this is just I've been experimenting with this over the past 2 weeks, is to rather than sitting the patient straight into the dental chair when they come into my surgery, so they're not in the, I'm not going to put them straight in the clinical environment. I sit them round this table and have a chat with them first, a little bit of social chat, see how they're doing, and then ask them about any problems that they're having with their dentures too. Um, and I've been doing this week, and I've found it great, and I've really enjoyed it, and I know that the patients have too. And then I sit them in the chair, and then I can get on and have a look at their mouth and resolve any problems. So the other change that I've instigated too, which is really, I didn't realize how, and I'm just feeling a bit silly actually saying that I just haven't done this, is once I've reviewed a patient with complete dentures or partials, is if they've been having problems, I just give them a call maybe 1 or 2 days after, and just follow them up to see how they're getting on. Um, and it just means that I'm not sort of forgetting about them, or they feel I'm not forgetting about them. It's like out of sight, out of mind. This is something that John Besford, my mentor, has talked about. This is a really important thing to do. And so I've been instigating that over the past 2 weeks as well. And I know that the patients feel happier. It's fantastic. So, right, during the whole thing, during this webinar, please just put in, if you've got any questions at all, during the whole process, please just pop them into the question and answer area, and we can just go through this. So I'm going to run through the treatment for Jan. And so now my approach for treating new patients is quite often the patients are traveling for quite a distance to me. So right at the beginning, rather than them coming right into the practice, I do a Zoom call. And this is me and Jan just having our Zoom consultation together. And so what we do is we just have a really good discussion about what our concerns are. So Jan she'd been wearing dentures for over 40 years, And about 30 years ago, she'd had a growth, and this is what her description, a growth on the inside of her lower jaw. That growth had been removed. She'd had a skin graft put in, and at the time, the lower denture was wired in place where she had wires put round the mandible to hold that lower denture in place. And it had been a horrific experience. And when she was talking to me, she started to cry about this. And she'd been wearing the dentures ever since. So after that had all been resolved. This was years ago. She'd got through that process, but she had these upper and lower dentures, and she'd been wearing these for the past 30 years. She had been to see other dentists because she knew that they were wearing and she was not totally happy with the aesthetics. But then the other dentists that she'd seen were really reluctant to provide her with a new set of dentures. Um, but um, but anyway, on discussion, she decided to come in and see me. So just remember, if you have any questions whatsoever, please either write it into chat or into the Q&A section of this webinar, and I'll go through it because I'm going to just break this down into stages. I'm going to talk about my primary impressions, working impressions, etc. So once I saw Jan, once I'd seen her on Zoom, she decided to come in. I said to her that when I'm doing my Zoom consultation, I can actually give them an idea on how much things are going to potentially cost. And I said to Jan, my complete dentures can range from around £7,500 and can go right up to about £15,000. And because of the altered anatomy that you have, it may be that you're going to be at the top end of that. So that gives an idea of what's going on. But this is at the consultation. You can see that what I was looking at here straight away is thinking, gosh, the lip support's not great. His teeth look tiny. Doesn't look fantastic. It's really, I'm just a bit concerned about, how the aesthetics are. And she just didn't like the look of them too. You can see how this is really dished in and caved in at the top there too. So these upper teeth are too far back and right over the ridge. It's like almost like a British standard denture, a BSD. So you can see that they're really quite worn. These have been worn for 30 years. There, a little bit of chipping and wear. Class 3 looking. So this is the upper in place, just slightly short of where I'd ideally like to take the posterior border. I like to take it just about here to get maximum suction. And just down here too, we've got the extension going into this area where she had that surgery. You can see that flange just there that went down into that section. So let's have a good look in the mouth here. We've got this is where we've got that grafted tissue there, and where she'd had this surgery done about 30 years ago. And the dentures had been previously, back then, whilst during the healing phase, wired in place, and it had just been an awful experience for her. So, and she was really worried about, having a new set and potentially traumatizing this, and potentially what her concerns was, if I make a new set, is it going to make this a problem and her to have more surgery? I knew that that was not going to be the case, but she's got these things in her head, that this could potentially be an issue. So these are the upper and lower ridges. Now, when I'm seeing a patient for the first time as well, I want to know precisely what the patient is wanting in terms of aesthetics. So she brought in these photos of when she had her natural teeth, and she's been edentulous since really very, very young. But this is her at school with her natural teeth. And even these school pictures are giving me some really good information about tooth positions and also lip support. This is in her early teens. You can see that upper lip support is not massive. So I don't have a massive amount of scope for bringing those teeth forward. This is what I'm thinking. What I also find funny is that, patients do, I say, can you just bring in photos of your natural teeth? And but they always end up bringing in photos of their then when they've got dentures in, which I'm not trying to copy, but these are she quite liked those. They were relatively soon after having her teeth out, so they're almost like the immediate dentures. And then this is further on down the line. This is with a baby there years ago, and you can see that the lip support's not great with those complete dentures, and I want to make a change there with them too. So she brought this in and she said, "Look, I really love to have my daughter's teeth." Interestingly, that's her daughter as a baby, and then this is her, with um, a natural teeth there. So that's great. Once I know what the patient is wanting, and then that's something to work towards. So that was what I used and said, look, we'll work towards that for you, Jan. That's great. So this is the fee that Jan paid for the complete dentures. And it took me 5 visits to construct the dentures. During this time, Rowan was my technician, was well up until the trying stage. Rowan did the trying stage, and then sadly he then had to go off work, and the dentures were finished by Sam. And then I've seen her for reviews since then. So this is visit one. So my first visit is to do the primary impressions. And so for the upper, I'm use these transform trays. They're fantastic shape for an edentulous mandible. You can see how tiny her upper jaw is actually. It's quite sort of retro Nathic, if you will. So this is how I do my primary impressions. I load up a syringe here with runny alginate. This is this is a Heraeus culture product called Alginoplast. It's beautiful. It's an alginate that goes in there. And then I use another alginate called Dentsply Blueprint in the stock tray. And they both work beautifully together. And what I do is I inject, when I'm doing the primary impression, I've got the runny alginate in the syringe. I've got the tray there. I inject that right up into the sulcus. I've got the patient sitting up. So inject that up into the sulcus, then take my other tray, push that over and capture the full depth of the ridge with this. So, and then just inject that up there into that area. So I'm going to just have a look at the questions here. Just want to make sure that everything is going good. So if you have any questions at all about my techniques during this, please just pop them straight into the either the Q&A or the chat box. I've got both of them up here so I can see them. So if you've got any questions about these techniques, just pop that in there and I'll answer them straight away live for you here. So I squirt this alginate right up so that I'm getting a really good sulcus impression. And this is the whole point here is to enable me to get a primary cast in order to make a custom tray. So I've got a question here from Dr. Snyder Hegger. And what is the ideal combination of alginates? Any particular company? Yeah, these two companies here. So we've got the Alginoplast here, which is made by Heraeus Culture there, which is readily available. I get that from Henry Shine. And the blue stuff is Blueprint Extreme X-Cream Alginate, and that is made by Dentsply. So they're the two things there. And that's, again, I get that from Henry Shine too. So that's great. So I've done that there. That's lovely. I'm going to go back to the screen. Super. So let's have a look at the lower one. Now in the lower, I use this primary impression tray, which is called a frame cutback tray. This is made by Morita in Japan. And these are fantastic for taking great impressions. It helps to develop suction on the final denture and helps me to record the retromolar pad and the whole thing. So I'm going to walk you through that now with this. So I use the same two impression materials, alginoplast in this range and a heavy-bodied and thick blueprint in the tray itself here, like that. So, and then I take that to the mouth. And what I'm doing is with this injection here, I inject that into the lingual sulcus all the way round, all the way round. And so, and then right round into the labial sulcus, labially there. And then I use this base material that I rotate that in, push that down, hold it in place, and just get the patient to, whilst I'm seating it, get the patient to lift up the tongue so I can just get it underneath the tongue, press it down nicely there, and then just wait for that to set, just close. And it produces a lovely impression like this. I've got a question here from Sertak Ozdogan for upper. Is it a plastic tray? Why not metal? And any wax use for the borders to get upper sulcus best? That's a really good question there, Zertak. And I don't need to use the metal tray. We could use a metal tray, but the shapes of these are really good. And these are plastic trays are very like the Schreinermacher trays, which were metal trays that I used to use. But metal is fine, absolutely perfect too. I find that using this syringe here, I can record the sulcus beautifully instead of using wax on the borders. But thank you very much for that. I'm just going to click on here just to say that I've answered that live. There, done. And then we can go back to presentation. So this is my primary impression here. I've recorded the sulcus all the way around. Here you can see the genial tubercle there. And the reason I love looking at these sorts of photos here and the frame cutback tray is so good at this is I can capture the retromolar pad and all of the lingual and labial tissues so that I can then construct a special tray to the perfect size for the patient there. So that's done in two parts too. And this frame cutback tray is fantastic. So 2 weeks later, I can then move on to my working impressions. And so this is what I get back for my visit two. So I've got custom trays here. I've got an upper tray, which is spaced, ready for alginate. And also I've got a lower tray here, which is close fitting. And I love using zinc oxide eugenol for the lower impression too. I also get wax rims to do a primary jaw registration. Now this is really important because I use this to mount my working casts in order to set up a Gothic arch tracer, which is great for recording the bite. So this is my upper custom tray here, and this is made with wax spacing for alginate. And Rowan makes this tray, my technician makes this tray short of the depth of the sulcus, so I can then board and mold that in the mouth, with the patient. It's non-perforated as well, notice that too, because I want to make sure that I've got good suction on the tray whilst I'm doing my border moulding of it. This is the lower primary cast here, and on that lower primary cast, the extensions for the custom tray are in my resources, and you can see that in this my complete denture construction manual. So if you want to look at the complete denture construction manual, then if you just do a screenshot of that and look that up there, you'll find here on figure 9, this is the steps in constructing the outline for a special tray. And if you follow those steps there, then this will really help to, if you're going to get suction, if I'm going to get suction on a lower denture, this is how I can do that with it. And this really helps with making the lower denture super stable too. So that's the lower tray there, ready to those extensions. There, this is a lower close fit tray. So we've got the patient in. This is visit 2, and I've got my tray ready to do my working impression. So what I do is I put on green stick stops here, 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 and at the back edge there. So this is green stick. This is applied to the fitting surface. I then push that into the mouth, seat it, and make sure it's square, making sure I'm lined up with the frenum at the front there. So it's just capturing the ridge first. I check then the extensions around the edge. If they're pushing into the reflection, I'll trim that back. And then after that, I add green stick to these buckle sections just at the back there, from about the 3 backwards. That goes into the mouth. It's nice and soft. Push that up, and then I mold those edges. I pull the cheek gently down one side, do it on the other, waggle the jaw, and then get the patient to open really wide. And watch what happens. If you look here, just there and there, watch what happens. It narrows it like that, there and there. So it gets nice and thin. And that, so that's functionally border molding. And that is now ready for me to do my working impression. And I like using alginate for that. So these are those buckle borders molded to the shape of the depth of the sulcus there, like that. This is looking from the back edge of the tray into it. So these are my green stick stops there, and the labial section just there. So what I do is I put lots of alginate adhesive on this. A really important tip here is I like using paint on alginate adhesive, not the spray. And I want to get it all over the surface and also on these surfaces too. So the alginate will come over and stick onto the outside of that there. So there's a question before about materials. This is the Dentsply blueprint, and this is what I use for doing my working impression with for my upper here. And I mix it up, runny. I mix it up. I use 2 scoops, but I use more water than is recommended to get a really like a runny mix. And then I glaze it with my gloved hand with some water there. Please, if you have any questions at all of these techniques, please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box there, and I'll be able to have a look at that. I'm just going to have a quick look just to see if there's anything in the chat there too. That's fine. There, good. So I'll pop this in the mouth, push it up so it's seated firmly onto the green stick stops. And then I border mold, pulling the cheeks, and then get the patient to pretend, this is really important, pretend to blow out candles. And also have a yawn as well whilst it's in place. Because I find that when they try and blow, or have a yawn, quite often the denture does want to drop, and also smiling that when they do a big smile. So it's just doing all of these different movements is so important in this. So that's great. So I've got a couple of really good questions. So Zertak has asked a question about we use holes for mucostatic impression. What do you prefer best? Well, I prefer to have no holes in the upper because I want to know that I've got good suction on the special tray before I do the impression, and that's really good. And the you're absolutely right about mucostatic and mucocompressive. I think both do push the gingiva a little bit. Um, and probably with holes in you probably pushing it slightly less, but I don't find it a problem and I don't need to do that myself. But hey, Zyrtec, the thing is there's loads of ways of skinning a cat. um Ash has asked, why do you use zinc oxide eugenol for upper impressions as well? Isha, I used to try using zinc oxide, the SS White material, and I found that it was just a bit too thick to get into the areas that I want to. But the Kelly's paste, which is what I'm using now, would work really nicely. So I don't think there's any problem with this. However, I find the advantage of the alginate is it's hydrophilic as opposed to being hydrophobic. So that's just personal preference. But I think the border molding is the key to this. Um, Jessica, hi Jessica. Hi Fen, do you ask for the handle of the upper tray to be positioned in a down position? Yes, I do. If you notice this, the tray handle position is down, so it's not getting in the way of the lip there too. You can see that the tray handle's out of the way. Um, and then, and what, look, can you see I push right through? This is Jan's denture. I push right through to the green stick stops. And then this all is border molded by the patient doing all of those movements. It's super important too. So that's great. Lovely. The So that's the working impression for the upper. Why no border molding of the anterior portion in the labial frenum area? So yeah, that's a good question, Snake. Why have I not done border molding up at the fronts here? What I want to do is to have this very, very thin here, right underneath the base of the nose, just there. And if I bulk it out with green stick, it's going to make the flange quite bulky too. We'll have to thin it back. And I want it really beautifully thin underneath the base of the nose. And I find that the alginate finds its way into that area. Very occasionally, if the patient's got a very, very flat maxilla snay, I will build that up with green stick, but it's just very, very odd occasion. So this is the way that I was taught by Fraser McCord and also by John Besford, and we find it really produces a lovely thin flange at the front there. So it's great. Thank you. So I've got a message from Bryn. Morning, Finlay. This is certainly an interesting case for us to see. Just a question about consistency of alginate. When you make the mix runnier to flow, does that have an effect on the dimensional stability? So when I do a runny mix, or is it a problem? No, I don't find it a problem at all, Bryn. It's great to see you. It's a the and also I don't find it at all a problem in dimensional stability at all. I make chromes with this material. I use a thicker mix for chromes, but even sending it over to Sam, who's like an hour away, and we put it in the post, it's not a problem. It's great. So it doesn't need to be cast straight away. Let's move on to the lower. This is the lower tray. I border mold these buckle bits first here. So I chunk out those. That goes into the mouth. I hold it in place, the tray, and I get the patient to go and ooh, E and ooh, like that. And this border molds those two sections just there. Now with this one here, we needed to put this little, it reminded me of a little Formula One car, with the Formula One car where you've got that aerofoil at the front that just goes into that flange area. So what I needed to do is build up my green stick just to fit into that area. So it goes into that. It's like a pocket. This is the ridge here just to go into that area. So that's before I molded it there. And then I popped it in and molded around just using my fingers to around that chin area too. And then it was ready to, and then the final bit of border molding is to put like a thin earthworm all the way along, avoiding the retromolar pad areas. Thin earthworm goes into the mouth, and I get the patient to, number one, lick the upper lip, and then number two, push firmly against the strut, and then number three, have a powerful swallow. We squirt some water in, and just watch what happens to the shape of this lingual section here when I click onto the next slide. There, it changes shape here in the depth of the sulcus. So I'll just quickly go back. So that's before, and then that's after in that area. So that molds to the patient's shape of the patient's mouth. So I'm just going to move that to there so I can see what's coming up better too. Sorry about this. That's great. And I then dry it thoroughly, completely like this. So it's totally dry, and then load it up. So, and this is the material I'm using for my lowers now. I used to use SS white zinc oxide, which has just been taken off the market. This is an American product by Waterpik, Kelly's paste, and it's slightly runnier than the SS white, but it works nicely too. So pop that in, push that down, and then once I've seated it, I get the patient to do these 5 different movements. So, and the movements are E and oo, E and oo, lick the upper lip really firmly, push the tongue against this lower strut here. And Jessica, you've noticed the tray handles there. These ones are sticking straight up, so they're not in the way. So yeah, push against that lower strut and then have a powerful swallow. So repeat those movements. It's dead important, this. So it goes in, E, so really moving the lips, push the tongue against the lower front strut, good powerful swallow, and that's it. And I like them to do it twice with this, and it comes out really, beautifully there. It's really good. So I'm just going to just check there's no more questions. Just one sec. That's good. Just going to move that out of the way too. That's great. And so this is the impression. You can see it's all, fills in, border molded beautifully into that anterior flange there, genial tubercle. So this is the shape of the final denture that I'm wanting. It's great, like that. There. And all of these surfaces on the outside, it's almost like a polished surface prescription too. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. There. So once I've done that impression, and by the way, how long do I spend? I want to answer the question. How long do I spend doing these working impressions? It takes me about an hour to do those impressions really, really well. And then I have another little bit of extra time for doing this primary jaw registration. These are just very simple wax blocks, and I trim them to the approximate OVD of the patient. So I just pop them in, look at the patient. If I think the OVD looks right, I then just fix them together. I'm not worried at all about trying to get them into centric relation at all at the moment. And then this helps to then we use this. This is used to mount the working casts here. So Rowan, or the technician, Sam, now, he'll trim away that external border, fit them onto my working impressions, and then mount that on the articulator. Now, Jessica, you've asked a question about would you use ZOE for any other impression situation or only lower complete? So, Jessica said, do I like zinc oxide for any other types of impressions? Um, do you know what? I love zinc oxide for doing reline impressions for complete lower dentures and also for reline impressions in partials in those saddle areas that may have had resorption over that saddle. But I don't use it for anything else. Good question. So this primary jaw registration helps Rowan the technician to make a central bearing apparatus just here like that. And it means that that is then parallel and I can use that in the mouth. And this central bearing apparatus is brilliant for finding precise centric relation. So let's fast forward another 2 weeks now to visit 3. So this is a lab work that I get back. I get a central bearing apparatus here, which sits onto the working casts. And I get another, this is a totally different wax rim. I call this a Manchester block at the bottom there and a upper wax rim there. So that's great. I'm just checking there's no more questions. So this is ready for my visit 3. And so first of all, I'm going to be trimming these wax rims to get the teeth in just the right place using photographs. And then after that, I'll be using this to record central relation really accurately. So these are the wax blocks here that I've got. And this is it in the mouth. And this is how Claire and I do the carving of the wax rim. This is our setup here. So we're both looking at the patient. What I think is really important is I've got the patient's head upright like this here so that I can see the patient in their social position. I've also got Jan's daughter's photo there, and I'm using that to carve the wax rim because I want to imagine, and both Claire and I want to imagine what Jan is going to look like if she has her daughter's teeth, and I want it to fit into her face shape. And this is my rim carving recipe. I carve the lip support, the incisal plane second, the occlusal plane, buccal corridors, centerline, and then get the OVD right. That's my recipe there for doing this. And what I love using to get the incisal plane and the occlusal plane correct, I like using one of these Fox's bite planes on it and looking straight at the patient. I think it's really important during this process. I like to move around and have a good look at the patient from different angles. This is another really important feature that I want to carve on that too, to get the campus plane parallel. And then after that, I want to get the OVD correct too. And I trim these wax blocks so that I can get the vertical. Once I've done the upper, I trim the lower to make, so that I'm looking at the patient. I think, yeah, they're looking good with this in place like that there. And I want to just look at them and think, yeah, does that vertical look okay? This is looking at the old denture. Can you see how this is retrognathic? And this is how I've brought the upper lip out. But what's really important, I think, with dentures is I'm really think about this, is that I don't want to bring their upper lip out massively. I don't want to make a radical change so that they're going to be noticed. So this is, these rims carved. So that's the old teeth. This is the new rims in place. Can you see how the lip support just looks better there? It just looks nice. Really good. Jessica has asked, do you ask for an acrylic base plate on the upper rim? Jessica, no, I don't ask for an acrylic plate on the upper rim because I've found that that gets in the way of me trimming the occlusal plane. Sometimes I have to trim through the wax and it goes right through to the plastic base. So instead, what Rowan does is, and I will find the photo for you back here. Just one sec. This is made of, it's got shellac in there, and it means I can trim this and even go through it at the back there. But if it's got an acrylic base like this lower, then it does get in the way. So that's the reason I use that instead. It's a good question. So this is her with the there, and I'm really, really wanting to visualize um Jan with her daughter's teeth. And when I look at her, I want to see after I've carved the rim, as imagine that the teeth are going to be on there. This is key to this, and this is what a lot of technicians say that dentists are not good at. Technicians say dentists are really good at doing impressions, but not great at doing carving wax rims well. And it is really important to do that. So once I've done that, I take the wax rims out and I put them onto the articulator here, and then I set the vertical here on the articulator to this my trimmed rims in the mouth. I then take those off the working casts. I put on the central bearing apparatus, and the central bearing apparatus has got a screw. It's got a ball bearing, a screw here, which I can open and close, and I can open it up so it corresponds with the vertical of the trimmed rims, and I can put that in the mouth. What I do is I put China graph mark on here, take that to the mouth, and then get Jan to move around, go forward and back, side to side, and then tap together, and it carves a lovely triangle here, and that's centric relation just there. I then attach a little plastic disc right over the tip of that triangle there, and then I can put that back into the mouth, get Jan to close up into that, and then I squirt in Futard and it locks it all together, really nicely, beautifully there, fixed together. So that's centric relation locked in. I do find that really is brilliant for finding centric relation, and it's very rare that I have bite issues with dentures. I then go to doing, so hold on a minute, I'm just going to Sneyd, sorry, Dr. Snay has asked a question. What about cases where a patient has some TMJ disorder is unable to give proper smooth movements? Snay, yeah, that's a really good question. And so even if patients have got difficulty moving, like they've got TMJ issues, I still find that they still are able to do a little triangle. Sometimes the triangle of movement is tiny, so it could be a little titchy triangle, but I've still got a good CR position. So I've not, and this is absolutely hand on heart, I've never not been able to find it, even with patients with TMJ issues or even with patients who just can't move very far. I just get them to tap up and down and just move as much as they possibly can. Great question, though. So let's just go back to this. So once I've done my Gothic arch tracer, I then pick up the wax rim that's been trimmed. I take that and then I fit on a bite fork. I use the Danar system, and I think this is really important. I love using a face bow. I don't mind what system it is, but I just have Danar in the practice. I line up my face bow with the interpupillary line, and so it's parallel with the incisal plane too. I want it parallel with the incisal plane because I want to have these models mounted so that Sam has Jan's head on the bench looking at him. straight ahead, and he knows that that will be the level that we're wanting to set the teeth up onto. Super important. So that's done there like that. And then this is the absolute must-have photo. I must take a photo. I always take a photo of the patient and send this to, so that the technician has this in particular to arrange the teeth, just like, in the patient. And that's so key. So this is all of the work that gets sent back to the technician at the end of visit 3. So my jaw edge, and so that's the carved rim. That's the CR record, and that's my face bow. So that the working models can be mounted in just the same way as it is in the patient NCR. Fantastic, thank you. Great. So the casts are mounted, and then the teeth are arranged according to the my carved wax rim. So this is what Rowan did for me. This is just before Rowan went off ill. He just did that. There again, Jessica, you were asking about, is it got an acrylic? The upper has a shellac base, and then Rowan can arrange the teeth. You can see how thin where the teeth are just in that area. This is so important because I've carved the wax rim parallel to the alar tragus. It's often really thin in those areas. So that's it there. Standard look. Beautiful. Ready to try in. So once I've done that, we take this to a try-in. I try that in and I double check the bite, make sure the appearance is good, like that. The bite's good. And because I've used the Gothic arch, it's great. And I take some photos of the patient with the try-in in place. And also what we do at this point, which I think is super important, is to do a video of the patient too. So Claire does a little video, sits down, shows the patient that, and make sure they're totally happy. I do not want to go ahead if they're not happy with the aesthetics. And she absolutely loved it, this one. So, and she really did love the improvement in her profile. And it's subtle as well. So now that Rowan is not working at the practice temporarily, I don't know when he's going to be back, but he'll definitely get better. I'm using Sam, who's off site. So my lab communication is different now. I do visit, I'm visiting Sam once a week, but also I'm filling in my lab ticket really comprehensively. But also I'm doing little videos for him too, Loom videos of me talking through the case with photos, etc., to really make sure that he knows exactly what I'm wanting. And then the dentures were then finished. These are acrylic dentures. The gunwork's been done with Shotlander high impact acrylic, and then the colouring is Candulor colours on there with a little bit of stippling too. And Sam's great. His technical work's really good. I'm just wanting to encourage him to be a bit thinner with these areas here. You can see it's a bit chunked out. This side looks better there. So thinner, strip back, slightly more subtle, like subtlety in these sorts of things. And then, so that's the upper denture finished. Been nice and brave with the tooth positions. So important, this, not standard. They're beautifully over the retromolar pads too. There. So that's the denture done and finished, looking great. And ready to fit. So denture fitting. What I want to do is to, when I'm trying in a denture, if I'm getting problems with soreness in certain areas, so when I tried this in and pressed the denture down without this silicone on, it was sore on these lingual areas. It hurt just there and there. So what I do is I put a light bodied silicone impression material. It's like the runny stuff you'd use for crown and bridge. That goes on the surface, push that into the mouth, let it set. And then I use a pen on that area and peel that off and then grind that back. I do that until it's nice and comfy there like that. So that's, and I want it to be not sore. It's really important. It does not hurt when the patient leaves. That's super important. So, so this is the denture fitted. Now, in terms of occlusion, what I'm wanting, this is important. What I'm looking for is this type of occlusion. This is Bob. This is a different patient, but I want grip on the premolars, but I want it to also pull through here like that, pull through like that, bite together, and open like that, so that it's nice and free on this up these anterior regions. So, Jessica, Jessica's asked a question. Let's just go back to the pen here. Sorry, just one sec. Jessica has asked, do you use a different pen for each patient? How does the Sharpie work regarding infection control? So what I do is I actually just use one pen, but I put the denture into Perform. Once I've done I do, I put it in the Perform after I've marked it like this. So I have this disinfection solution. It goes into the disinfection solution first, then take it out, and then I dry it. I then mark it with the pen like that. And then I grind it back, grind that off, and then the denture goes back into the solution like that. So I'm not throwing a new pen out each time. So that's so once I'm happy with the occlusion, and then talk to the patient. That front bit there just fits into that little pocket just at the front. And that was it fitted. Looking nice. So you can see that just the gum's just a little bit chunky there. You know, benefit of fine sight, and what we're working on now with Sam is just get that thinner. I just want these thinner and more subtle. It still looks really nice too. So Paolo has asked, why do you want anterior space in occlusion? Paolo, it's a great question. When we're having a look just there, so just at the front there, in all dentures, I do not want to have contact of the upper and lower teeth. Now, Paolo, this is really important. It may, looking from the front, it may look like there's contact, but if you look from the side, there is freedom. It's called freedom in centric. I don't like the patient to be able to bite on these front teeth heavily because it can make the dentures tip. I want them to do the work on the premolars. It's a great question. So, right. So this is, the improvement we've got in the denture in terms of the aesthetics, and she loved them. So she went away, and I review after a week. And a week later, Jan came in, and she was really sort of dead upset because she was getting sloughing. Can you see here? This where the graft, that skin graft was. This is from my head cam. Is rubbing in that area, and it brought back all these horrible thoughts of her surgery back 30 years ago. But I reassured her everything's going to be fine. I put my silicone on, pop it in there, and then you can see where it's just pressing firmly on that area. So I just use my Sharpie there, grind it back, and then just repeat that until she's totally happy. So we're up to 8:32 now, so we've just done an hour. That's so she has got on beautifully. I've reviewed her twice, and she's getting on really, really well with that. If you've got any other questions, just pop them in the questions just now. My next case presentation will be Thursday, September 19th. I'm going to do and this each month I alternate it between in the evening at 7:30, 7:30 p.m. British summertime, and then in the morning 7:30 British summertime. So people in different parts of the world can watch this. Um, it's fantastic. So, and I'm going to do a partial denture next time, a metal-based partial denture. So that's great. Thank you very much for all your questions to everyone, and have a really great rest of the day. This is going to be recorded. I'm going to stick it onto my YouTube channel too. So if you want to revisit it again, that's fantastic. So anyway, bye for now, and you take care, all of you. Thank you.